So I'll just introduce myself. I am Emily Brackett. I am the founder of Branding Compass and president of Visible Logic. Visible Logic is an award-winning branding firm that provides brand strategy, naming, logo design, website design, and content marketing services to both startups and established organizations. After running my branding firm for more than 15 years, I created Branding Compass, which is a web-based software that gives automated expert branding advice. And Branding Compass will help you write a unique value proposition, gives recommendations on the best colors, fonts, visuals for your branding and marketing, and will help you develop the messaging and voice by identifying the right words to attract your ideal customer. Welcome to Better Branding is Better Business, and I'm glad you are ready to overcome your branding challenges and grow your business in 2019. Thanks for joining me. I'm really excited to have you here today. You may remember that when you signed up for this webinar, there was a chance to ask a question. And I wanted to let you know I was blown away by the number of people who took the time to ask a question and how thoughtful those questions were. So I can tell you've been doing some thinking about your branding. And I did want to let you know that we'll be touching on some of those questions, like how your branding should change as you enter new markets or introduce new offerings, how to build a brand that works for different types of buyers and audiences, and how to know when it's time to do a brand refresh and how to do that successfully. So maybe you're ready to make some improvements to your brand messaging or market positioning as a whole, or what's really common with established business owners is that you may need to redo your website, and that forces you to think about your branding again. Maybe you're in the position of making more sales presentations, attending conferences, or or maybe trying to attract investors, partners, resellers, et cetera, and you realize that your branding just doesn't feel right to you. Your brand is a representation of your business. Your logo is like a shorthand abbreviation for your business and a way to identify it. Your prospects are developing expectations about the quality of your product or services by seeing the quality of your website and marketing materials. Your brand is a promise, and it encompasses your reputation about what they can expect from you, so it is extremely important. You may feel that your branding was never well crafted from the start, or it has slowly grown out of date. Your business and the type of products and services you are offering may have changed, and you're not sure if your branding is on target anymore. Whatever your situation, it's time to build a brand that can be an asset for your business and can support your growth. Whatever your situation is, it's a time to think about your branding, and let's start with a reminder about why it's worthwhile to invest in having a strong brand. So first of all, having a strong brand allows you to charge higher prices. We think of this in the consumer market all the time with, people paying a premium from everything from Coca-Cola compared to RC, or a Lexus versus a Hyundai. The brands that have the reputation are going to be able to command a higher price. As small business owners, it often means more like attracting better quality clients. These are the clients who are ready to work with the best in the field. They are willing often to pay a little bit more there. Having a great brand makes it much more likely that your own clients will refer others to you. And having a strong brand will make all your marketing more efficient. If you have a clear vision for your brand, you have branding guidelines, everything you do can be done much more quickly and everything will be on target. Finally, if you're in the position to be attracting employees, you will attract better quality candidates if you have a strong brand. So it's all worthwhile. So what I have to show you here, I want to start with is these very unscientific charts that are my visualization of some of the typical ways that businesses change over time and how it relates to their branding. So generally, your brand should be tracking hand in hand with your business itself. Like when you first launch a business, you're relatively unknown. Your branding was as good or as poor, and by that I mean on target and professional, as your investment was in it. But your brand is a living, breathing entity with its own energy. If you ignore your brand, it starts to feel outdated. And there are a few reasons for this. One reason is the visual nature of brands and how visual trends change. A design that feels really up to date gradually falls out of favor, and suddenly your brand doesn't look or feel relevant. Related to that, most businesses today are changing very rapidly themselves. So it's very likely your business is evolving with new products and services or new messages. So gradually, a wedge grows between your business offerings and the brand that is supposed to be representing your business. So this second chart is what I see a lot, especially with professional services companies. You may not be actively updating your website or too busy on social media. So one day you wake up and you look at your website or you pull out your business card and they both look really tired and out of date. Unfortunately, it also can be caused by looking at your finances and find that your firm is not growing as much as you like. In fact, you've even plateaued or declining in revenues. And that's often a time for self-reflection. And you start to look around, you realize that your branding is no longer attracting your ideal customer. So this is what we see, sort of stagnation of your company and this ignoring of your brand over time, and eventually there's this wedge between it. There are also some more positive business changes that may have you re-examining your branding. And I know from your questions that at least a few of you are in this position. You've expanded your business with new products and services. You may have even merged or acquired another business. And what worked when you were a smaller business no longer works with your expanded offerings, or because you're selling to multiple different types of audiences. So whether you started out with a strong brand at some point in the past, or if honestly you never felt good about your branding, if you recognize right now that there's a gap between your brand, where your branding should be and where it's at, we're going to start to figure out how to fix that. So let's start with a bit of the branding basics. Then we're going to talk to you about how you can make improvements like a branding refresh or even rebranding when you have an existing business. So often these are things maybe that you didn't do as well as you should have from the beginning. So that's why I want to start with the basics. So to create an effective brand, you want the benefits of what you offer to be immediately clear and appealing. So is it clear what you offer? Is it clear why it's better than other alternatives? And ideally, does it have some sort of emotional appeal to people? And let's take a look at how these two businesses do this and how they compare. So if you're not familiar with these, but I think most people are probably familiar, at least with Dropbox, but both of these services are cloud-based file storage services. They back up your files. And so really, if you look at the features, there is quite a lot of overlap. They're really, competitors, pretty direct competitors. And you can see how Dropbox, though, has a name that is very friendly and simple, right? Drop your thing in a box. It's a cardboard box, pretty low tech feeling. It feels really easy. Everybody is familiar with that metaphor. On the other hand, the name Carbonite just sounds really strong, and maybe it's some sort of, high-tech material. Suggests a little more the technology side. Dropbox uses these hand-drawn illustrations, which feel really friendly. So you get this sense, this is going to be easy to use. On the other hand, it may be hard to see here, but this is like this rugged steel background texture here, again, suggesting security. Even the content here on Dropbox is, work on slides together, easy language, talking about collaboration. Carbonite, on the other hand, their copy tends to talk a little bit more about automatic backups, and it's a little bit more targeted to an IT professional rather than maybe an individual business owner or just an individual person. So one exercise you can do is start by listing the benefits of the features and services that you have, and then translating them into adjectives or metaphors that can start having a visual feel to them. So let's see how those two companies did that. So here's Dropbox. So Dropbox talks about back up your files so they can't be lost. You can access your files from anywhere. It's an easy-to-use interface. You can collaborate with others. And the adjectives that those all bring up are accessible, approachable, simple, friendly. And I think you saw that graphically with everything from their name to the visual style of their website. By contrast, Carbonite emphasizes different benefits: automated backups, secure storage of remote files. They talk about the levels of permissions allowed. So the things that come to mind there are automatic, systematic, secure, safe, reliable, tough, traditional, hierarchical. So, and you can really see that look and feel expressed visually with their identity. So you want to think about what your benefits are and how you can translate that visually. The next step is thinking about who. Who is most likely to buy from you? Now, you are all established business owners, so you should have some customers now. So the best thing to do is think about who are your favorite clients. Who do you love working with? Who is easy to work with, pays you on time, really gives you the challenges that you like depending on the nature of your business. And then you want to think about what do those people all have in common. So there's two things to think about with your ideal customer, and the first side is the demographic side, and those are often sort of concrete details about them. And so, for example, if you have a retail or restaurant, location is pretty critical. If you're selling a B2B product, the job title, the industry sector, the size of the company, et cetera, may be critical. If it's a consumer product, age or gender may factor in heavily. But you can see that one of the shortfalls with that is as you expand, for example, to a different industry, you announce a different location or a different product, you start feeling like, oh, everything I thought about with my client may no longer fit with this new product or service I'm doing. So that's where you really want to start paying more attention to the psychographic details. So that is, what are their interests or attitudes, their personality, and a lot of this gets down to what are the real pain points that they're feeling that your product addresses, or again, the gain that they get from using. So the pains and gains, and really what are they at the most core point, and very emotional. Again, that's probably what's going to connect your ideal customers even as you expand your offerings or locations, et cetera. So again, you want to find visuals that reinforce your benefits visually to attract your ideal customer. And every good branding decision should do these three things. It should support exactly what you offer. It should reinforce your benefit. It should definitely never contradict it. Now, not everything will, you have multiple benefits, I'm sure, of choosing or using your product, but you should never be introducing something that contradicts it. And it should always attract your ideal customer. And these can be summarized in a unique value proposition. We're not going to go over a complete, how to write a unique value proposition from start to scratch, so we're not going to cover that all here, but these are the key elements, and we will go through definitely those key elements. So in fact, what people often ask me, like, what are the most important elements to think about for a successful brand? I know that, you probably do have limited time and limited budget, and so what is the most important thing to focus on? And I will say that having the key components of a value proposition is really critical. So you need to be clear about the value you bring to clients. And you might want to consider actually writing out a unique value proposition. And there's a lot of places you can look up how to do that. Branding Compass will help you with that process and actually automate it, so it's a tool to consider. But these are the most important pieces that you should be able to do. It should clearly say what you do. It should talk about the benefits in a way that's easily understandable and has an emotional connection. It should be clear who your ideal customer is. And overall, it should be succinct and focused. So think about this is very similar to an elevator pitch. If somebody met you, like, what do you do? What's your business? Or another great way would be, how can I refer customers to you? What do you do, and who would be a great person to refer to you? You should be able to say that in 1 to 2 sentences. Should also be something that your employees are able to do. Another thing to think about is what has changed about this since you first started your business, because that may help you identify those pieces in your brand that feel off target. The second thing that on my top 3 list is, I do believe the single most important brand asset to make sure you have right is your name. The right name will make all of your branding and marketing easier, and the wrong name will eventually become a ball and chain around your neck, slowing down the growth of your business. So if you have been in business now, some of you it's months, some of you it's years, if not decades, if there's been this lingering thing of, wow, every time I say my business name, people think the wrong thing, no time is better than now to finally deal with it. If you realize it has not resolved itself, even though you've been in business, rip the Band-Aid and fix it. So here are some of the elements that you should think about. A good brand name is easy to spell correctly and avoid certain ones that have, strange spellings. And similar to that, it should be easy to pronounce. And these are so, first of all, somebody can Google you and find you, and other people, like your current customers, will feel comfortable making a referral to you. People do not like to look dumb, and so if they're not sure how to say your name, they will actually be hesitant to make that referral, and it will limit your business that way. So make it easy to spell, easy to pronounce. And the other thing is, if the way something looks and reads doesn't match with how it sounds, you are missing, every brand touch point builds recognition and trust, and you'll have to do twice the work if people are not connecting the way it sounds with the way it's written. Next, it is best if a .com domain is available. It's not always. I know it's tough these days. They're becoming scarce. But the big thing to avoid is when you have a different domain name than your brand name. People nowadays are very concerned about phishing scams, etc., most especially if it's an e-commerce platform. This is just confusing. Do not have a different domain name than your brand name. The best brand names suggest what you do. The worst ones confuse them. So again, if you've been in business for a while and your name is just, you tell somebody what you do, it's okay if it doesn't answer every question, but if it's getting people off track, that's a problem. The best names give you some sort of emotional sense of the benefits. Definitely don't want something that conflicts with them. And depending on the nature of your business, it can be a real advantage if it's ability to, if it's an actual search term that might capture search traffic. So the third thing that we want to look at, once you have, really past the startup stage, is you should be starting to have some established brand guidelines. These should cover visual styles as well as messaging and voice. And you should begin to pull these all together for several reasons. The first one is to confirm to yourself that you really have thought about everything and have a clear vision for each of the elements that I will discuss in a minute. If you can't even articulate it to yourself, you're not going to be able to articulate it to employees and partners and prospects. So that's the first thing, force yourself to get clarity. The second thing, as I started to say, is these are things that you should start sharing with employees or vendors or designers. So, if you hire a marketing firm or a design firm or a website firm to help you, everyone should be in sync. And the most important thing is to create consistency. Consistency is incredibly important for branding. As I've alluded to before, you need this repetition to build trust. And if things look different or sound different, then you're not building that repetition that is important for building your reputation. So these are the pieces that I believe are really must-haves in your branding guidelines. So the first is a unique value proposition. I covered some of those elements earlier. I think you really want to get to the point where it's a 1 to 2 sentence piece, and all of your employees know it. It should be clear on your website. It doesn't have to be word for word, but there should be definitely, like, you get this, whatever your unique value proposition is, should be reinforced on your website. You should have a word mark at the minimum for your business name. I really don't think a symbol style of logo is a requirement, but you need a word mark. That's where you have a fixed way of typesetting your name, a certain color, certain font, certain style, and it's a graphic element, and you have a library of this, this logo. It doesn't have to have a symbol, but definitely what is often called a word mark. Sometimes people call this a logo type. You should have consistent colors. Often the key colors come from your logo. Depending on the style of your logo, that might be giving you one color, and then you have another palette of accent colors. If your logo is 2 or 3 colors, those should be the predominant colors in everything you do. You should be working towards developing something really distinct about your style. It could be done with photography. It could be done with charts and graphs. It could be done with hand-drawn illustrations or computer-generated illustrations and icons. It can be done with a very distinct type style. And I'm not saying you need to do all of these. You want to pick, 1 or 2 that combined with those colors becomes this very recognizable piece. So if somebody saw some marketing materials, it would be like, oh, that's clearly your company. I can really start to recognize some key pieces there. And as you're growing your business now, you want to have created some standards that you can produce yourself. So for example, if you have a hand-drawn illustration that requires you to hire an illustrator every time you want to post something to social media, that's going to really limit your ability to do that. So think about things that you can do that you have the resources to do. If you have the resources to have a design and marketing firm who's working with you consistently, that expands your capabilities. If you're trying to do it in-house, think about what is the skill set whoever's going to do it, what is the software they can use, so that it's something you can produce yourself, especially if you're doing like social media or blog posts on a regular basis where you need to create these elements. The next thing is you should have an ideal customer profile. Look, those demographics, the psychographics, you may need to have more than one. You may have sort of like segments within that and then some overarching themes, but you should have a clear customer profile. This helps you with a lot of decisions, especially if you get more into the advertising and marketing. And you should know who your competitors are and know how you're better and different. A lot of people do this when they start a business, and then they often don't do it again for a long time, and probably the competitive landscape has changed, and I encourage you to take a fresh look at what your competitors are doing. They may have updated their own brand, their website, as well as their offerings itself. So you should be doing this on a fairly regular basis to see what's out there. And so the best place to start all this activity is an audit of your current brand usage. See how many of these you feel confident about right now. Try to pull these elements together in one place, and it'll help you understand where you feel good about your current brand and where you can focus your attention. Because that's often, you may be feeling, I can tell something's off, but I'm not sure what. And if you go through this, you're going to have a better understanding of what you need help with. And if you're looking for a tool to help you walk through all of this quickly and easily, you may want to look into Branding Compass, because I started this Branding Compass because this can feel unmanageable, right? And it can feel overwhelming and confusing, and got the siren going by. Sorry, I'm not sure how much you can hear that. But in about an hour using Branding Compass, you're going to generate a unique value proposition. You're going to get recommendations on visual styles. You're going to get a visual of what your ideal customer looks like. You're going to get this market product fit check that shows you the best words to talk, how to use that voice and benefits to attract your ideal customer. And we do have a special offer on Branding Compass for people on this webinar. There's 3 levels that we sell of the reports. For $99, you get visual recommendations. I feel like for established business owners, I would definitely be looking at the Pro or Premium license, because that's where, in addition to those visual recommendations, you get the ideal customer profile, you get the voice and messaging recommendations, and you get this product market fit visualization. And so we're offering a special today using the coupon code 2019 upgrade, where you can go pay for a Pro license, get the Premium, and that includes an individual consultation with me for free. So again, we'll email you this coupon code with the webinar recording later today or tomorrow, but it's going to be 29 upgrade, all caps. And if you're feeling like I'm overwhelmed by where to begin, we highly recommend that. But that's okay, you don't have to use it, and I definitely want you to feel like you're getting value from this webinar regardless. So after you've done these exercises, whether it's on your own or using Branding Compass, it's time to evaluate your branding and make decisions on what you want to change and ensure that those changes will actually be improvements. So the things that you want to be looking at are, when you assess your brand, is the first thing is it on target? And the second one, is it high quality? So on target means, like, does it actually resonate with what you offer? Does it express and start to capture the benefits and emotions attached to that? And does it attract your ideal customer? There can be really something that's, very beautifully designed, but is not on target. On the other hand, you could be saying, like, we actually are pretty on target, but now it's time to up the game and really invest in a designer to help enhance the messaging, enhance the visuals, etc. So you want to look at it both whether it's on target and whether it's high quality. And so the thing is, people are always concerned, well, what about like losing what I've already done? And so let me start by explaining that your brand's value changes over time, and you may have heard crazy numbers about the value of Apple's brand equity. So they say, like right now, Apple's valuation hovers around $20 billion, but they can really only account for about 60 to 70% of that $200 billion with like actual things that would be sellable, meaning like their real estate and their manufacturing, et cetera, these actual hard assets. And there's this gap between those hard assets and the value of the company. And that is called brand equity. Now, in your case, we're probably not concerned with valuation numbers in this same sense. But what does matter is really about brand recognition, brand trust, and reputation. And that's really at the heart of, how Apple grew so big. And experts say that it takes, 6 or 8 or even more brand touch points to make your brand recognizable and trusted. You've spent the last few years building up your credibility. Hopefully people know your brand name, they know you, your employees, they might recognize your logo. We hope they might be able to pick out your marketing materials or a screenshot of your website and what I call the collateral lineup. And to change all this feels risky, right? It's potentially becoming the new guy again, someone with no experience that no one knows or trusts. So should you change, and how much? So these are a few things I just kind of want to bring to your attention here to think about in this process. One thing that's really changed over the past couple of years, so depending on how long you've been in business, is design standards have actually really gone up. The bar is high. It used to be that small businesses and new businesses looked small. They had poorly designed websites. It was kind of okay if things didn't look too polished. But the launch of platforms like Squarespace has changed all that. So now, for very little money, every new business has a highly polished website. Now, when you pull back the veneer on these, the messaging may be off base and there may be big issues with the functionality of the sites or how it attracts search, but the bottom line is people expect great looking design and a really well thought out user experience. And related to that, people expect from using websites and news sites and social media channels and blogs, people expect things to be updated frequently. And so there is this sense, if you have an out-of-date website, most especially, it just starts to really make you feel irrelevant. So as we've become a more digital world, people accept that things change, and also remember that your online brand is probably more important than ever. And finally, as a reminder, the quality of your brand is what people will expect of your products and services. So if you've been kind of just putting this off, you're thinking, I'm putting it off, I've got a big to-do list, but you probably are definitely losing prospects who've taken the time to look at your branding and have made a decision to go elsewhere. So the big question is, what should you change and how much? So as I said before in the part about naming, my first recommendation is that if there are problems with the core elements of your brand, fix them now. The sooner the better. If you have a poorly fitted name, it's probably causing problems for you, and why continue with these problems? When you consider the value that comes from a professional brand image, anything that you do to improve it is probably worthwhile. But I do realize that you're small business owners, you need to think about the expenses involved and whether there'll be a payoff. So let's just take a look at the advantages and disadvantages of making changes. So the first thing is, if you make a change, the advantage is you're presenting a brand image that's hopefully a better fit, it's more on target. The disadvantage is potential confusion, and that's what people really worry about, but I think there's definitely ways to alleviate those problems. We hear about in the news companies that rebrand because they've had some sort of PR disaster and they want to be disassociated with their old brand name. But in your case, you can do things to minimize this confusion. You would, as people come to a new site, especially if you changed your name, you would be this company was formerly this. You wouldn't be hiding it. In advance of changes, you might announce, you're going to see in the coming months a new logo, a new name, et cetera. So you can manage that a bit. I do think the advantage of having the right brand will probably, will outweigh any problems with confusion. And again, another advantage, of course, is a more professional brand image. It means that people will expect more from your company. You do need to think of, obviously there's some expense with developing it, right? You're going to have to pay a designer, for example. You may need to spend time with your team to really get to the heart of what your value proposition is. There are different expenses in time and budget to do it. But again, when you're more on target, there's a lot of value there. Also, related to that is that there are expenses of implementation. If you are a professional services firm, implementation may be very easy. It's just like updating your website, which you probably are already planning to do if you're going to do an upgrade. It's just letterhead and business cards. However, if you have, uniforms and trucks and a million different partners who have your logo, think about what's going to be involved there. But we have found that the attention from a rebrand is actually really positive. You can go so far as writing a press release and bringing attention that way. I pretty much guarantee if you write a newsletter or a LinkedIn post announcing a new logo, a new website, etc., it really brings people out of the woodwork to take a second look at your company. The big thing is these last two are that I think people get too fearful about like, oh, it's going to raise these questions and confuse people, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, I think there's a lot more potential upsides to cleaning up your brand. It suggests that you're not out of touch, and in fact, you're evolving with a rapidly changing industry. It signals that you are taking a look at everything and that you're making changes. And so generally, these are really pretty positive things. What I do think is important is to make a connection with your current brand and your new brand. So here's just a quick list of some ways you might do that. For example, if you decide to create a new logo, maybe you use the same colors as your previous logo. Even with a new name, okay, same thing, like you might change the name, but you use the same corporate colors. Color is such a visual reminder for people, so it's a great way to keep a connection when you make a big change. I love this next one. You update your logo design, but you keep the same concept. And this is where if you have branding that's on target, it continually can be refined. So when you can afford a better designer, or just every few years as you want to refresh things to make it look more up to date, if there's a core of the concept behind everything in your brand, you can do that more easily. Another way is like we're going to tweak the color on things, but you've always done green and it's always sort of been Kelly green, and now we're going to go to a lime green, et cetera. So just like a thing that signals a change without being wildly different. So those are some different ways. And you will probably be more successful if there's some connection to where you are now when you do a refresh of your brand. And so finally, this is where we're concluding. I know that we started a little late, and I want to keep this on time. This is how Dropbox's logo has evolved. You can see on the left is their original logo. The typography was really similar to like what Apple had been doing. And Apple is known for, it's an electronics company that's really easy to use. So that really resonated with the same message. So they kind of wanted to make that connection. And they started actually with that more illustrated style on their logo. So again, when they evolved their logo to something more simple, which is the middle one, they switched the illustrated box to a more abstract symbolic box. It's the same shape, it's just one solid color now. But they kept that illustrated style on their website. Like that screenshot I showed earlier is a pretty recent screenshot from Dropbox, even though this first logo change happened quite a few years ago. And then the last one on the right, they actually changed the typography. So you can see the black typography was a condensed font. It had a gradation. In the middle one, they changed it pretty much to the same font. They used the same font, but they made it solid, one color blue. And then in a third iteration, they changed it to what I do think is a more friendly font. And so you can see how it evolved that way. So hopefully this is, gives you a little inspiration for what you might do. So I'm fine answering some questions now. I know we got a little bit of a late start, and I hope that people have time to stick around for questions. And Stephanie, hopefully she can manage the questions, and if not, she'll give me the flag. No, we cannot hear you. Let's see if I can turn you on. Okay, so Stephanie's not coming through, but that's okay. I know that some people gave me some questions ahead of time, and I'm seeing some others right here. Great. So probably one of the biggest questions, I'm seeing a little bit of a theme here, is what is the most important piece to start with? And I really think your website is probably the best place to start. And the reason I say that is because, well, first of all, okay, I think everyone agrees that websites in general are just more important than they ever were. There sort of used to be a time where it's like, oh, okay, I have an e-commerce site. Everything's like, I am a web-based business and it matters. But even if you have you're a professional services firm or you're any sort of brick and mortar thing, your website, everyone goes to your website nowadays to check you out. So I think for that reason, your website is very, very critical. I also find from having worked with clients that your website it really is like the synopsis of everything. You have to figure out your messaging because there's words on there. You have to figure out your visual style, clearly, because it's visual. You have to figure out who are you talking to for your ideal customer, and you might do that through photographs of who you feature, like if you have photos that look like customers, or just talking about the benefits and, real specifically in a way that feels like a connection to your ideal customer. So I do feel like the website is like, if you can figure out your website, you've probably figured out a lot. So it's kind of the toughest one to start with, but if you figure it out, you've done a lot. So that would be my suggestion there. So another question I'm seeing, and this is coming in live as well as it was kind of repeated, this is a submitted question as well. It's a big thing about multiple audiences. So two big things to think about with audiences. The first is if you have referral partners, so this could be, there's a couple scenarios where this is common. I'll give the most easy to understand one, which is you have a consumer product and it's a new, health food, energy bar, and you want to sell it at Whole Foods. You have this person who you think is going to enjoy the energy bar. They are a consumer, but you probably need to convince like the buyer at Whole Foods. You may need to also convince a distributor. Like there's this whole line of people that you need to convince. But in that case, your branding should always focus on the end user. I really believe that because the Whole Foods person, for example, they should be smart enough to understand that if I want Like, I'm going to sell, if you say, I have this product that really appeals to this demographic, and they're like, yep, that's my demographic, or the demographic I want in my store, that they're going to understand that. And so you might have sales promotions or whatever that are focused on getting distributors interested or getting stores online, but you wouldn't fix your branding to that. That would be more of a sales play than a branding play. Your branding, your big branding value proposition should be, I think, to your end users almost always. And then the second thing there, so that's more like the channel of buyers. The other thing is, and if you have multiple audiences, that really, I think, goes back to that slide with the demographic and the psychographic. The demographics may change. Maybe you're now selling into a different industry or sector, a different type of business or a different location, but what is the universal benefit that is attractive to all of your different clients? And really, really focus on that. Is it ease of use? Is it low cost? Is it highly integrated? Is it expertise? Figure out what that is and then try to build a brand that focuses that on the most essential elements. So I think that would be my recommendation there. Let's see. Any other questions? Please go ahead and be typing them into the question thing or the chat. I know some people have, it's a little bit easier to see one or the other. You're welcome to do either one. I did also just put up my contact information here. If you want to reach out to me with other follow-up questions. I know that we had several people put in your website for review, and I just didn't have time to get to that on this call, unfortunately. It was helpful for me for providing the content, and I hope you found this valuable. But I would suggest you try Branding Compass and use that code, and that will actually get you an individual consultation time with me. So I recommend that. And so just one last question here is about like specific tools to use. People are always asking me, like, well, how should I build my website, for example, or what service should I use to get my design made? Like, should I go to an individual designer or branding firm or 99 Designs or et cetera, et cetera? Should I use Squarespace, WordPress? I really believe that if you have all this real clarity in your mind, if you've put together, you might feel like it's the chicken before the egg to be coming up with these guidelines that I mentioned, but those are the things that if you have a customer profile and you have that list of benefits and those adjectives and the idea of like what that brings to mind, both emotional wise and maybe even like ideas of visuals, if you can share that with a designer, or if you keep that in mind when you use any of those services, keep thinking about like, don't get distracted by like, oh, this is what I like, or this is the template that was put in front of me by these services. Really force yourself to keep coming back to that. If you do the Branding Compass and you have this report in front of you, you can just keep going back to it and saying, this is what I stand for, this is who I'm trying to attract, this is the overall vision for my brand. So, I think that is all the time. Let's see. That we have here. Yeah, the free consultation is about 30 minutes. And yes, you go through Branding Compass, you get your report, you schedule a time, and we can look at whatever you want. Use that 30 minutes to review your report, review your website, whatever you like. So it's a pretty good deal. I think that's all we have time for. So I hope this has been valuable to you, and you will be emailed a recording of this webinar. We will send the coupon code to you, and I hope you'll follow up if you have any questions, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.